Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Once her rich father married an evil stepmother. She settled in the house with her 2 daughters. Their faces were beautiful and white, but their hearts were evil and cruel. And then came a difficult time for the poor girl. From morning until late in the evening, they forced her to do dirty work, carry water, heat the stove, cook food, wash dishes, and do laundry. And besides, the half-sisters did their best to upset her as much as possible. They mocked her, poured peas and wheat into the ashes, and she had to sit and pick them out. In the evening, when she was tired of work, she had to go to bed not in bed, but on the floor, next to the stove. And because she was always in ash, dust, and dirty, the sisters called her Cinderella. But then it happened one day that the king started a feast, which was supposed to last for 3 whole days, and called all the beautiful girls of the country to the holiday so that his son could choose a bride for himself. When the 2 named sisters learned that they, too, could come to the feast, they instantly began to dress up and preen. Cinderella also wanted to go dancing, but her stepmother did not let her go, because she had no dress or shoes, and she was dirty. And then the evil stepmother poured a bowl of wheat into the ashes and said that if Cinderella collected it in 2 hours, then she could go with her sisters. Cinderella went out into the garden and cried. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds. They swooped down on the ash and began to peck, and so they chose all the grains in a bowl. In less than an hour, they finished their work, and everyone flew back. Cinderella brought a bowl to her stepmother, began to rejoice, thinking that she could go to the feast. But her stepmother would not let her in any way. She turned her back on Cinderella and hurried with her 2 daughters to the ball. When there was no one left at home, Cinderella sat down on the floor and cried with grief. And then 2 white doves flew in, followed by a whole flock of different birds, and they threw off their dress and shoes shiny and all in gold. She quickly put on this dress and came to the bride. They saw her stepsisters and stepmother and thought that it must be some strange princess, she was so beautiful in her golden dress. It never occurred to them that it was Cinderella. The prince came out to meet her, took her hand, and they began to dance. And he liked Cinderella so much that he did not want to dance with any other girl. She danced until the evening and wanted to return home, but the prince asked her to see her off. He wanted to know whose beautiful girl this is, and where she lives. But Cinderella ran away from him and climbed onto the dovecot. The prince ordered to destroy the dovecot, but there was no one in it. And nowhere near could he find his beautiful stranger. No one could have guessed that Cinderella was rescued by pigeons that took her home. The prince was upset and went to the palace with his head down. And suddenly he saw a shoe, lifted it up. It was so small and elegant and all of pure gold. The prince guessed that when Cinderella ran away from him, the shoe from her left foot remained on one of the steps. The prince was delighted and ordered to find the mistress of this shoe, and to whom it suits he will marry that one. The parents returned from the ball. They saw that Cinderella was asleep in her shirt on ash, and a dim light was on by the stove. Both sisters went to their rooms, hoping that tomorrow they would be lucky enough to put on the golden slipper. The next day, the prince came to their house, and said that everyone who wants to try on the shoe of his future wife should come out. 2 sisters came out, and the stepmother locked Cinderella in the house and did not let her out. The older sister tried it on a small shoe. The younger sister tried it on the shoe as great. The prince was about to leave, but Cinderella climbed out of the window and ran out to him. And she put on a shoe, and it just fit her. The prince looked into her eyes and recognized in her the very beautiful girl with whom he danced. He took Cinderella, put her on a horse and rode off to play a wedding with her. And he ordered the sisters and stepmother to be locked in their house, and never let them out of there. This is how they were punished for their malice and deceit. Once upon a time there was a miller with his beautiful daughter. He really wanted to get rich, so he did nothing but lie to others. The people did not like this, and they complained about the miller to the young king. The king decided to teach the miller a lesson and called him to the castle. Introducing himself to the king, the miller told about his beautiful daughter. He lied that she knew how to turn straw into threads of gold. The king asked the miller's daughter to come to the castle the next day and show everyone her abilities. When the father told his daughter about this, she was furious that he had lied again. The next day they went to the castle. The king led the girl into a room in which a spinning wheel and a basket of straw were prepared. The king ordered that by dawn all the straw turns to gold, and if she fails, then her father will be punished for deception. The girl looked at the straw and cried bitterly. Suddenly, the room lit up with light, and a small man appeared in the middle of it. The midget asked why she was crying. The girl told him everything. The little man offered to help, but in return he asked for a necklace that hung around the girl's neck. She agreed, and the dwarf set to work. As soon as he turned all the straw into gold, the little man disappeared as suddenly as he appeared. Morning has come. The king entered the room and was amazed at what he saw.
Cool.
The girl was happy. But instead of letting her go, the king brought in more straw. He ordered to turn it into gold by morning. The girl began to cry again. But then the dwarf appeared before her again. This time he asked in return for a precious ring that her mother had given the girl. The dwarf took the ring and began to spin straw. By morning the baskets were full of gold. When the king entered the room, he was very pleased.
Cool.
But instead of letting go of the girl, this time he filled the whole room with straw. The king ordered all the straw to turn to gold by dawn. In return, he promised to pardon his father and make her queen. As soon as the king left the room, the dwarf appeared again. But this time, the girl couldn't give him anything. And then the little man said that he would turn the straw into gold if in return the future queen would give her child, who would be born. The girl saw no other way out, and therefore accepted his offer. When morning came, the king saw gold, and was very happy. This time he kept his promise. He freed the girl's father, and made her his wife. So the miller's daughter became queen. After a while, her child was born. And one day, when the girl was putting him to bed, a little man appeared. He warned that he would take the child in 3 days if the queen did not find out the dwarf's name. As soon as the little man disappeared, the girl asked the servants to make a list of all the names in the kingdom. By morning the servants brought the list. When the dwarf appeared, he asked the queen what his name was. She began to read all the names on the list one by one. When the queen had finished, the little man said that none of the names fit. And he disappeared. The girl asked the servants to make a list of all the names in the neighboring kingdoms. By morning, the servants had written on a piece of paper all the names they found. When the dwarf appeared, he asked the queen what his name was. She began to read all the names on the list one by one. But there was no right one among them. And the little man disappeared. The queen asked the servants to visit all known countries and collect as many names as possible. At dawn, a servant told the queen that he had seen an unusual situation the night before. Walking through the woods, he came across a small house. In the courtyard near the fire, some dwarfs sang a song that tomorrow the queen's child would finally be his. And at the same time joyfully shouted out his name. His name was Rumpelstiltskin. When morning came, the dwarf appeared again. He asked the queen what his name was. The girl pretended not to know his name and began to read the names from the list. With each new wrong answer of the queen, the little man became more and more joyful. Finally, the girl uttered his name. And at the same moment, the ground under the feet of the dwarf crackled, and he fell into a huge hole. So the queen got rid of the greedy little man. Later, she told the king about everything. He saw that the queen was sorry for what had happened and forgave her.
Okay.
Since then, they have lived happily ever after.